Let the weight of the day fall away from your shoulders, like a coat you've been carrying too long. Tonight we're asking a question you've lived with every single day, but perhaps never truly stopped to wonder, what is time really? Not the hours on your clock or the dates on your calendar, but the thing itself, the force that carries you from breakfast to bedtime, from childhood to now, slipping through your hands like water you can never quite hold. I'm curious, where in the world are you right now? And what does your corner of time feel like at this moment? Is it quiet and still, or softly humming with the rain, or wrapped in the warm glow of a single lamp? If you find a little peace here tonight, I'd love for you to stay. Perhaps subscribe to keep this gentle space alive, or simply press like as a way of saying, I was here in this moment with you. So breathe, let your thoughts slow, and let's begin. You're here now, lying down perhaps, or sitting in that particular way people do when the day has finally loosened its grip. Your body knows this feeling, the slow unspooling of tension, the way your breath begins to find its own rhythm without you telling it to. And here's something curious right now. In this exact moment, you're standing at one of the strangest borders in human experience, the edge between waking and dreaming, between the day you just lived and the one waiting somewhere in the dark ahead. But let me ask you something more interesting than what time it is. Where is your mind right now? Not your body, your mind. Are you replaying that conversation from this afternoon? The one where you wish you'd said something different? Are you rehearsing tomorrow's meeting, pre-living a future that hasn't arrived yet? Or maybe you're somewhere else, entirely a memory from last summer or 10 years ago or childhood. Most of us, if we're honest, spend very little time actually here. We're time travelers, constantly jumping backward into regret or forward into worry. We live everywhere except now, and that's what makes tonight different. Tonight, we're going to do something unusual. We're going to stop traveling. We're going to stand still in time and look at it, really look at it, perhaps for the first time in your life, not to understand it in some abstract, intellectual way, but to feel it, to see how it moves through you, how it plays tricks on you, how it can stretch like warm taffy or snap past like a rubber band. Because here's the secret, the time on your clock is not the time you actually live. This video will take about 90 minutes, but for you, it might feel like 10, or it might feel like forever. That's not a flaw in your perception. That's time showing you its real face. So let me offer you an invitation. If you came here to learn facts, to add information to your mental filing cabinet, you might be disappointed. But if you came here to feel something, to drift through ideas, the way you might drift through a warm evening, letting thoughts rise and fall like breathing, then stay. And if somewhere in this journey you find a moment that makes you pause, that makes you see your own life differently, I'd be grateful if you'd mark it. Not for me, but for yourself. Like a comment, a subscription. These aren't transactions. They're little stones you leave behind to say, I was here. I felt something. I existed in this moment. Because that's all time really is in the end. A string of moments where you existed. And this one is ours. So, settle in. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. We're about to walk through 3 doorways. The first doorway, time, as you feel it in your bones, in your heart, in this strange, elastic, stretching of your days. The second doorway, time, as humans have tried to capture it with shadows and water and atoms and light. And the third doorway, time, as it might actually be or might not be at all. Let's begin with the simplest question of all. Why does time feel so different depending on what you're doing? Picture this. You're in your kitchen. You've just put the kettle on. You're making tea or coffee or instant noodles. Doesn't matter. What matters is this. You're standing there waiting for the water to boil. And those 3 minutes, they feel like 30. You find yourself staring at the kettle. You open it to check if the water's even heating. You tap your fingers on the counter. You check your phone. Put it down. Pick it up again. Time has become thick, viscous, like you're wading through honey. Every second announces itself. Every moment has weight. Now picture something else. You're watching a film you love, or you're deep in conversation with someone who makes you laugh, or you're so absorbed in something, a book, a game, a project, that you've forgotten the world exists. 3 hours pass, and it feels like 20 minutes. You look up confused. How did it get dark outside? When did that happen? Time didn't just pass, it vanished. It slipped away while you weren't looking like a pickpocket in a crowd. Same clock, same seconds ticking, completely different experience. So what's happening? The answer is surprisingly simple, and it changes everything. Attention is time. When you're bored, when there's nothing to capture your mind, your brain turns inward, and when it does, it starts counting. It becomes hyper-aware of each passing moment, like a child in the back seat asking, "Are we there yet?" every 30 seconds. Your internal timekeeper, and yes, you have one, we'll get to that, starts beating like a drum. Tick, tick, tick. Each beat gets registered, cataloged, felt. Time becomes heavy because you're carrying the weight of every second. But when you're absorbed, when your attention is fully captured by something outside yourself, the counting stops. Your brain isn't monitoring time anymore. It's too busy. It's experiencing, not measuring. And without measurement, time does something magical. It disappears. Let me show you. Right now, I want you to do something. Don't worry, it's gentle. For the next few breaths, let's say 5 or 6, I want you to count each one. In, out, 1, in, out, 2. Just count them, nothing else. Go ahead. I'll wait. Did you feel that? Did you notice how each breath seemed to take up space? How you were aware of time passing, of seconds accumulating? Now let me tell you a story and just listen. Don't count anything. There was once a painter who lived in a small village by the sea. Every morning, she would wake before dawn and walk to the cliff edge with her easel. She painted the sunrise, the same view every single day for 40 years. People thought she was mad. Why paint the same thing over and over? They'd ask. And she'd smile and say, "It's never the same. The light is always new." One morning, she arrived at her spot and realized she'd forgotten her paints. For the first time in 40 years, she just sat, just watched. No brushes, no canvas, no task. And in that moment, she saw something she'd never seen before. Not in the sunrise, but in herself. She saw that she'd been trying to capture time all along, trying to hold it still on canvas. But time didn't want to be held. It wanted to be lived. She never painted the sunrise again. She just watched it every morning for the rest of her life. Now, did you notice? While you were listening, did you count time? Did you feel seconds ticking? Or did you just fall into the story? That's the difference. That's the secret. Time doesn't exist in the same way. When you're not measuring it, it becomes something else. Not a series of moments, but a flow. A current you're swimming in, rather than a metronome you're counting. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it flow state. The artist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying it. Those moments when people become so absorbed in what they're doing that they lose track of time entirely. Musicians describe playing a concert and feeling like it lasted 5 minutes when it was actually 2 hours. Writers talk about looking up from their work and being shocked that the sun has set. Athletes speak of being in the zone where thought disappears and there's only movement, instinct, presence. And here's what they all say: those are the moments when they feel most alive. Not because time is moving quickly, but because time has stopped being relevant. Think about that. The moments when you feel most alive are the moments when you're not thinking about time at all. Which raises a philosophical question, doesn't it? If no one is measuring time, if no one is counting the seconds, does time exist? Or is time something we create by paying attention to it? Hold that thought. We'll come back to it. But first we need to talk about why childhood summers felt like they lasted forever, and why the last year of your life seemed to pass in about 3 weeks. Close your eyes for a moment, not literally since you're listening, but in your mind, and think back to a summer when you were, say, 8 years old. Can you feel it? The particular weight of those days. The way they stretched out endlessly, each one its own universe. The scratch of grass on your bare legs. The specific flavor of whatever ice cream you loved then. The sound of cicadas, or sprinklers, or your mother calling you in for dinner. Remember how long those 3 months felt, how it seemed impossible that summer would ever end, how the first day of school felt like it was years away, not weeks. Now think about last summer. Where did it go? One moment, it was June, and you were making plans. The next moment it was September, and you were wondering what happened to July and August. They vanished. They barely touched the sides on the way down. Same length of time, same number of days. Completely different experience. What changed? The answer is both beautiful and a little bit sad. Novelty creates time. When you're 8 years old, almost everything is new. You're encountering the world for the first time. Your brain is like a camera with the shutter constantly open, recording everything. That tree you climbed first time, that scrape on your knee, a new kind of pain, that argument with your best friend, the first time you felt betrayal, that moment lying on your back, watching clouds, a revelation about the size of the sky. Your brain logs all of it, every detail, every sensation. And when you look back, when you try to remember that summer, your mind has hours of footage. You don't remember it as one blurry stretch. You remember moments, specific, vivid, detailed moments. And because there are so many of them, it feels like it took a long time to live through. But at 35, at 50, at 70, your brain has optimized. It's learned to compress. It's seen trees before. It knows what grass feels like. It's experienced summer approximately 30 or 50 or 70 times. So it stops recording every frame. Instead, it takes shortcuts. It creates summaries. Monday work, Tuesday work, Wednesday work, weekend generic relaxation, another week same as the last, another month file it under routine. Your brain zips it all up into a compressed file and moves on. And when you look back, when you try to remember the last 3 months, there's almost nothing there, just a vague sense of time passing. No specific moments, no vivid details. It's like trying to remember a drive you've taken 100 times versus a road trip to somewhere completely new. The familiar route leaves no trace. The new journey, you remember every turn. This is why time seems to accelerate as you age. It's not that time is actually moving faster, it's that you're encoding less of it. Your life is becoming a series of compressed files, and compressed files take up less mental space, which makes them feel shorter in retrospect. And here's the heartbreaking part. This is also why old people sometimes seem to live in the past. It's not that they're stuck there. It's that the past has more resolution. Their childhood, their youth, their early adulthood, those years are rich with detail, packed with novelty, full of moments that stood out. The last decade, it's a blur, so they return to where the memories are vivid, where time feels real, where life has texture. But here's the thing, and this is important, so listen closely. You can change this. You can make time slow down again, not by living longer, but by living newer. It's absurdly simple, almost too simple to believe. Take a different route to work. Not sometimes. Tomorrow, notice what you see. Actually look at the buildings, the trees, the faces of strangers. Eat something you've never tried before. Not at a fancy restaurant. At the grocery store. Pick up something random. Taste it. Really taste it. Talk to someone you wouldn't normally talk to. The barista. The person at the bus stop. Ask them a question. Learn their name. Do this, and your brain will start recording again. It will create new memories. Specific ones. Detailed ones. And when you look back on your week, your month, your year, it won't be a compressed file anymore. It will be a collection of moments, and moments strung together are what make a life feel long, not in a tedious way, in a full way. This is the secret that children know and adults forget. Time expands when you pay attention, not attention to the clock, attention to the world, the taste of your coffee, the feeling of rain on your skin, the exact shade of blue. The sky turns just before dark. These aren't distractions from your life. They are your life. And the more of them you collect, the more time you'll feel you have. Because in the end, time isn't measured in hours. It's measured in moments you actually lived. So that's the first secret of time. It bends with your attention. It stretches with novelty. It disappears when you forget to notice it. But attention and novelty aren't the only things that warp time. There's something else, something even more powerful. Your heart. Time doesn't just bend with your attention, it bends with your emotions. And in the next part of our journey, we're going to see just how much your feelings can stretch and compress the moments you live through. But first, take a breath. Let that settle, because we're about to step deeper into the strange elasticity of time. And once you see it, you'll never experience a moment the same way again. There's a man I want to tell you about. His name was Marcus, and on a Tuesday afternoon in October, his car skidded on the wet leaves and went sideways into oncoming traffic. Years later, he still remembers it, not in the way you remember most things vaguely, with the edges blurred. He remembers it the way you remember a film you've watched frame by frame in slow motion. He remembers seeing the other car approaching. He remembers the exact pattern of rain on his windshield. He remembers his hands on the steering wheel, the texture of the leather, the way his wedding ring caught the gray afternoon light. He remembers thinking very clearly, this is going to hurt. The whole thing took maybe 3 seconds, but when he describes it, when he walks you through the memory, it takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Because in his mind, it didn't happen in 3 seconds. It happened in a stretched, elongated, almost dreamy extension of time, where every detail was magnified, every moment expanded. It was like watching a movie in slow motion, he says, except I was in it. This is one of the most commonly reported experiences in moments of danger. Time slows down. People see things with impossible clarity. They process details they shouldn't have time to process. And here's what's strange: for a long time, scientists wondered if people actually did gain some kind of temporary superpower. If fear or adrenaline somehow sped up their brains, allowing them to think faster, react quicker, perceive more. So they tested it. They took volunteers and dropped them from tall heights into safety nets while having them try to read rapidly flashing numbers. The idea was, if time really slows down during fear, they should be able to read faster numbers than normal. But they couldn't. Their reaction times didn't improve. Their visual processing didn't speed up. In the moment itself, they were just as fast or slow as they always were. So why does everyone report that time slowed down? Because your brain doesn't slow down time. It does something cleverer. It records more. Think of your brain as a camera. Normally, it's recording at, let's say, 24 frames per second. That's enough to capture the basic flow of events, enough to make sense of your day. But in moments of danger, of intense emotion, of significance, the frame rate goes up. Suddenly, it's recording at 60 frames per second, 120. Every tiny detail gets captured, every micro expression, every sound, every sensation. And when you play that memory back later, when you try to describe what happened, you're watching all those extra frames. You're seeing the event in high definition, in slow motion, because there's more information packed into the same amount of clock time. Time didn't actually slow down. Your memory just became denser. It's beautiful in a way. Your brain's emergency protocol. When something important is happening, something that might kill you or change you or matter deeply, it decides we need to remember this. All of it. Every detail might be important. And so, it records everything. But danger isn't the only thing that does this. Love does it too. Think about the first time you kissed someone you really cared about. Not a casual kiss, not a polite kiss, but that moment when you'd been dancing around each other for weeks, when the tension had built to the point where the air itself felt electric, and finally, your lips met. How long did it last? 5 seconds? 10? It doesn't matter. Because in your memory, it lasted forever. You remember the exact temperature of the air, the specific way their hand felt on your face, the sound of traffic in the distance, or rain or music, the way your heart wasn't just beating, but pounding like it was trying to escape your chest. That moment has more detail, more texture, more realness than most entire days of your life, because your brain saw it coming. It knew this matters, and it opened the aperture wide. This is why the happiest moments of your life often feel like they pass in a flash while you're living them, but when you remember them, they feel endless. Your attention was completely absorbed. You weren't thinking about time. You were just there, fully present, drowning in sensation. So the moment flew by, but your brain captured every frame. And now, in memory, it stretches out like a piece of music you can listen to over and over, finding new details each time. Compare that to boredom. Boredom is the opposite. When you're bored, your attention has nothing to grab onto. So it turns inward, starts monitoring itself, counting time. Tick, tick, tick. The waiting room at the dentist. The last hour of a shift that's going nowhere. The mandatory meeting that could have been an email. Time doesn't just pass slowly, it becomes painful. And here's the cruel irony: when it's over, you remember almost nothing. Because your brain recorded nothing. There was nothing worth recording. So boredom makes time feel long in the moment, but short in memory. Joy makes time feel short in the moment, but long in memory. And fear does both. It makes the moment feel long and the memory feel long, because it forces your brain to record everything, whether you're paying attention or not. But there's another emotion we need to talk about, one that does something different to time entirely: anxiety. Anxiety doesn't just stretch time, it multiplies it. Imagine you're waiting for medical test results. The doctor said they'd call within a week. It's been 3 days. Those 3 days don't feel like 3 days. They feel like 30. Why? Because you're not living in the present. You're living in 1,000 possible futures all at once. Your brain is running simulations. What if it's bad news? What will I do? How will I tell my family? What comes next? And what if it's good news? But what if they're wrong? What if they need to do more tests? What if? Each of these futures has its own timeline, its own sequence of events, its own emotional weight, and you're experiencing all of them, not sequentially, but simultaneously, like watching 20 movies on 20 screens all at the same time. So those 3 days of real time get overlaid with hundreds of days of imagined time. No wonder it feels endless. This is what anxiety does. It doesn't just make you worry about the future. It makes you live the future over and over in every possible variation. And because you're living it, really experiencing it emotionally, it counts as time. Not clock time, but psychological time. The time that actually matters to you. People who struggle with anxiety often say they feel exhausted, even when they haven't done anything. But they have done something. They've lived multiple timelines. They've experienced hours and hours of events that never actually happened, but felt completely real. That's not laziness. That's not weakness. That's your brain treating imagined futures as seriously as it treats the present moment, which from an evolutionary standpoint makes sense. Planning for danger kept our ancestors alive. But it also means you can spend an entire day sitting still and feel like you've lived a week. And then there's the opposite: depression. Depression doesn't make time fast or slow. It makes time stop mattering. People in deep depression often describe time as flat, unchanging. Every day the same gray color, the same weight, the same emptiness. Not because nothing is happening, but because nothing feels meaningful enough to mark the passage of time. Time, it turns out, only exists when we care about it. When you're looking forward to something, time crawls toward it. When you're dreading something, time races toward it. When you love someone, a moment with them can feel eternal. When you lose someone, the years without them can feel like seconds. Time isn't neutral. It's not a river flowing at a constant rate. It's a mirror. It reflects what you feel back at you, distorted and amplified. Einstein supposedly once explained relativity like this: put your hand on a hot stove for a minute, and it seems like an hour. Sit with a pretty girl for an hour, and it seems like a minute. That's relativity. He was joking, of course. That's not what relativity actually means. But he was also more right than he knew, because long before Einstein discovered that time bends with gravity and velocity, humans had already discovered something just as profound. Time bends with emotion, with fear and love and boredom and anticipation and grief. Your heart is its own kind of gravity, warping time around it, stretching and compressing the moments you live through based not on physics, but on meaning. And maybe that kind of time is more real than the time on any clock, because that's the time you actually live. So now you know. Time is not a constant external thing happening to you. It's a fluid, flexible, deeply personal thing happening through you. It bends with your attention. It stretches with novelty. It warps with emotion. But there's one more layer we need to explore before we leave this first doorway. One more clock that's ticking inside you that you probably don't even know is there. Your body has its own sense of time, and it's been keeping track since long before you learned to read a watch. Let me tell you about a man who lived in darkness. His name was Michel Siffre, and in the summer of 1962, he did something that most people would consider madness. He descended into an underground cave in the Alps. No sunlight, no clocks, no way to tell day from night, and stayed there for 2 months, completely alone, completely cut off from time. The goal was simple: to see what would happen to a human being without any external time cues. Would he fall apart? Would his sleep schedule dissolve into chaos? Would he lose his mind? What happened was stranger. Siffre didn't fall apart. Instead, his body created its own time. Without any clocks or sunlight to guide him, he naturally fell into a rhythm. He would wake up, feel alert for a while, get tired, sleep, wake up again. The cycle repeated, and when he finally emerged and compared his notes to actual time, they discovered something remarkable. His internal cycle was almost exactly 24 hours. Not precisely 24, usually a bit longer, around 24 and a half hours, sometimes 25, but close, incredibly close, which meant something astonishing. You don't need the sun to know what time it is. You have a clock inside you, and it's been running since you were born. This internal clock isn't metaphorical. It's real, physical, located in a tiny cluster of cells in your brain, right above where your optic nerves cross. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, but we don't need to remember that name. Just know it's there, about the size of a grain of rice, and it controls more of your life than you probably realize. It tells your body when to wake up and when to feel sleepy, when to release certain hormones and when to hold them back, when your body temperature should rise and when it should drop, when you should feel hungry and when food should sound unappealing. It's conducting an orchestra of approximately 37 trillion cells, keeping them all synchronized, making sure your liver and your heart and your brain are all working on the same schedule. And the wild part, it does this even if you're in complete darkness, even if you've never seen a clock, even if you're blind from birth. Your body knows time, not clock time, not it's 3:45 p.m. time, but biological time, daytime, nighttime, time to wake time, time to sleep time. This is why jet lag feels so terrible. Imagine this: you board a plane in New York at night. You fly for 14 hours. You land in Tokyo, and suddenly it's tomorrow morning. Your watch says it's 9 a.m. The sun says it's 9 a.m. Everyone around you is awake and energized and starting their day. But your body, your poor confused body, is screaming that it's 8 p.m. yesterday. Your brain is begging for sleep. Your digestive system is preparing for dinner, not breakfast. Your heart rate is slowing down for evening rest, just as Tokyo wants you to speed up for morning productivity. It's not that you're tired from the flight. You could sleep for 24 hours on a plane and still feel jet lagged when you land. Because jet lag isn't about being tired. It's about being out of sync. Your body is a symphony orchestra, and every instrument is playing a different piece of music. Your brain thinks it's in New York. Your stomach thinks it's in mid-Atlantic. Your liver gave up trying to figure it out and is just doing whatever. It takes days for all the instruments to finally agree on what time zone they're in. Days for the conductor, that little grain of rice in your brain, to bring everyone back into harmony. And here's the thing, you can't rush it. You can't think your way into a new time zone. You can't decide, I'm going to feel awake now and have it work. Because this clock is older than consciousness. It's older than thought. It runs on a level so deep that your conscious mind doesn't even have access to it. It's been running for millions of years in our ancestors, in their ancestors, in every creature that ever needed to know the difference between day and night. You inherited it. You can't turn it off. But here's where it gets interesting and frustrating. We live in a world that thinks it can override this ancient clock. We have electric lights, bright as the sun, available at midnight. Screens that emit blue light, the specific wavelength that says to your brain, hey, it's morning, wake up. So you're sitting on your couch at 11 p.m., scrolling through your phone, and the light hitting your eyes is telling your brain it's dawn, time to start the day. Your little internal clock, trying to do its job, trying to keep you synchronized with the natural world, gets confused. It thinks, wait, sunrise, but we just had dinner. Is it morning already? And so, it delays the release of melatonin, the hormone that makes you sleepy. It keeps you alert, awake, wired. Then you finally put the phone down at midnight, frustrated that you're not tired yet. And you lie there staring at the ceiling, wondering why you can't sleep. You're not insomniac. You're not broken. You just spent 3 hours lying to your brain about what time it is. And your brain believed you. This is why sleep experts say no screens an hour before bed. And people roll their eyes because it sounds like such old-fashioned advice, like something a grandmother would say. But it's not mysticism. It's biology. Your brain has a clock that's trying to keep you alive trying to synchronize your body with the rhythm of the planet you live on, and you're shining artificial sunlight directly into your eyes and wondering why the system breaks down. Try this just for 3 days. Turn off all screens an hour before you want to sleep. Dim the lights. Let the evening actually feel like evening. And notice what happens. Notice how sleepiness comes earlier. Notice how falling asleep gets easier. Notice how maybe for the first time in years, your body remembers how to follow its own rhythm, because that rhythm is still there. That clock is still ticking. You've just been drowning it out. And here's the last piece. The piece that explains so much about why you might always feel tired at the wrong times, or why mornings are agony, or why you come alive at night when the world wants you to sleep. Some people are larks. Some people are owls. And this isn't about discipline or laziness. It's about genetics. Your internal clock doesn't run at exactly 24 hours. For some people, it runs at 23 and a half. For others, 24 and a half. Sometimes even 25. And that difference, that tiny difference, is enough to make you naturally a morning person or a night person. Larks have slightly shorter cycles. Their brains want to wake up early, go to sleep early, start the day with energy. Owls have slightly longer cycles. Their brains want to stay up late sleep and hit their stride at night. And here's the tragedy the world is built for: larks. School starts at 8 a.m. Work starts at 9 a.m. Important meetings are scheduled for morning. The message is clear. If you're not a morning person, you're lazy, undisciplined, not trying hard enough. But that's not true. If you're an owl, you're not lazy, you're not broken, you're just living in the wrong time zone, a permanent internal time zone that you were born into and can't change. Your brain naturally wants to go to sleep at 2 a.m. and wake up at 10 a.m. That's when your body is synchronized, when your rhythm feels right. But society says, be at your desk at 9 a.m., sharp, and be productive. So you set an alarm for 7 a.m., which to your internal clock feels like 4 a.m. You drag yourself out of bed. You drink coffee to simulate wakefulness, and you spend your entire life feeling like you're slightly out of sync, because you are. If this is you, if you've always felt like mornings are violence and nights are when you finally come alive, please hear this. You are not lazy. You are not undisciplined. You are not broken. You're just an owl living in a lark's world. And the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop fighting your own biology and start working with it. Because that clock inside you, it's been keeping time for millions of years. It knows what it's doing. Maybe it's time we listened. And so ends the first doorway. You've seen how time bends with your attention, stretches with novelty, warps with emotion, and pulses in the rhythm of your own biology. Time, as you experience it, is not the time on a clock. It's something alive, something personal, something that lives in your bones and your blood and your heartbeat. But humans, being humans, couldn't leave it there. We had to capture it, measure it, pin it down like a butterfly under glass. And so we invented clocks, thousands of them, over thousands of years. And that's where we're going next, through the second doorway, into the dream of measurement. You've just walked through the first doorway. You've seen time as it lives inside you, elastic, emotional, biological. Time as you feel it. But feeling time wasn't enough for us, was it? Humans are strange creatures. We have this compulsion to take invisible things and make them visible, to take the formless and give it form, to take the impossible to hold and build a container for it. We did it with air. We called it wind and built windmills. We did it with fire. We called it energy and built engines. And we did it with time. We looked at this invisible river flowing around us and said, we need to catch this. We need to measure it. We need to own it. And so, thousands of years ago, in the desert heat of ancient Egypt, someone looked at their shadow and had an idea. The sun moves. Everyone knew this. It rises in the east, climbs across the sky, sets in the west. And as it moves, shadows move with it. In the morning, your shadow is long, stretching out behind you like a reluctant companion. By noon, it's a puddle at your feet. By evening, it reaches out ahead of you, pointing toward the coming night. Someone noticed this. Someone watched their shadow change throughout the day and thought, this is time. I'm watching time move. And so they built a monument to capture it. Around 1500 BCE, the Egyptians erected enormous stone obelisks, towering pillars that cast shadows across marked ground. As the sun moved, the shadow moved, touching different markers: morning markers, midday markers, evening markers. These weren't just clocks. They were statements. Because here's what's interesting. The pharaohs didn't build these sundials so farmers would know when to plant crops. They built them to show power. Think about it. Time until that moment belonged to the gods. The sun rose and set by divine will. The seasons turned because the gods commanded it. Time was sacred, untouchable, beyond human control. But now the pharaoh had built a device that could track the sun's movement, that could divide the day into segments, that could predict when the sun would be exactly there. The message was clear. I control time. I own the day. I own you. Because whoever controls time controls society. If you decide when the workday starts and ends, you control labor. If you decide when prayers happen, you control religion. If you decide when meetings occur, you control power. This is still true today. Think about it. Your boss sets your schedule. The school decides when your children learn. The government sets the time zones. Time isn't just measurement. Time is authority. And it started with shadows. But shadows had a problem. They only worked when the sun was shining. At night, during storms on cloudy days, the sundial went silent. Time disappeared. Humanity needed something that could mark time in the dark. And so, we turned to water. Imagine a large vessel filled with water. Imagine a small hole at the bottom. Water drips out slow and steady. Drop, drop, drop. Below it, another vessel catches the water. As it fills, markers on the side show how much has accumulated. 1 hour's worth, 2 hours, 3. The Greeks called it klepsydra, water thief, because that's what it did. It stole time from the invisible and made it visible, measurable, containable. And here's the beautiful part. Water doesn't care if it's day or night. It doesn't need the sun. It just flows constant and reliable, marking the passage of time in a way that shadows never could. The Romans loved these water clocks. They used them in courtrooms. If you were a lawyer in ancient Rome, you didn't get unlimited time to make your case. You got a set amount of water. Let's say 10 liters. That's your time to speak. The water would start flowing. You'd present your argument, and everyone in the courtroom could physically see your time draining away, drop by drop. When the vessel was empty, you were done. Sit down. Your time is up. Tempus fugit, they said. Time flees. But really time was dripping away like water. You couldn't hold, couldn't stop, couldn't get back. The metaphor was perfect. Water flows, time flows, life flows, and once it's gone, it's gone. Then came the monks, medieval Europe, Christianity spreading across the continent, and the church had a problem. Monks needed to pray 7 times a day, matins at dawn, lauds in the morning, prime terce sext nones, vespers, 7 moments throughout the day when every monk in every monastery needed to stop what they were doing and pray. But how do you coordinate hundreds of monks across a sprawling monastery when most of them can't read, and sundials are useless at night, and water clocks are too cumbersome? You build something new. You build a clock that doesn't have a face, doesn't have hands, doesn't show numbers. You build a clock that sings. The first mechanical clocks in Europe didn't tell time visually. They told it with sound. Bells, a mechanism of gears and weights, would release at regular intervals, once an hour or every few hours, and strike a bell. The sound would echo through the monastery, through the village, across the countryside, and everyone would stop. Not because they knew it was 3 o'clock. The concept of hours as numbers didn't exist for most people yet. They stopped because the bell had rung, because sound itself had become time. Time wasn't something you looked at. It was something you heard, something that interrupted your life at regular intervals, like the voice of God, reminding you that you existed within a divine order. This is important. Time at this point was still sacred. The bells didn't ring to help you be productive. They rang to remind you to pray, to step out of your daily labor and acknowledge something beyond yourself. Time belonged to God, but that was about to change. By the 14th century, merchants were getting restless. The church bells were fine for prayer, but commerce needed something more precise. Trade needed coordination. If you're meeting someone to exchange goods, you can't say, "Let's meet sometime after the bells ring." You need specificity. You need 3 o'clock on the 15th day of the month. And so slowly, clocks moved from churches to town squares. And for the first time, they got faces. Numbers appeared. Hands appeared. Suddenly, you could look at a clock and see time as a quantity, as something that could be divided, measured, bought, and sold. This was the moment. This was when time stopped being sacred and started being economic. The invention that made this possible was almost absurdly simple: the escapement mechanism, a gear with teeth that caught and released at regular intervals, making a ticking sound. Tick, tock, tick, tock. For the first time in human history, time had a heartbeat. And once we could hear it, once we could feel it ticking away, we became obsessed with it. Wealthy families commissioned private clocks. Not to know what time it was, they could look at the town square for that. But to own time, to have it ticking away in their homes, a status symbol, a demonstration of wealth and modernity. Time was no longer something that belonged to the gods or the church. It belonged to whoever could afford to buy it, and the world would never be the same. Then came the pendulum, 1656. A Dutch scientist named Christian Huygens was watching a chandelier swing back and forth in a church, and he noticed something. No matter how wide the swing, it always took the same amount of time to complete. A perfect, natural rhythm. And he thought, what if we could use this? He built a clock with a pendulum, a weight on a string swinging back and forth, controlling the release of gears. And suddenly, clocks weren't just sort of accurate, they were precise. Previous clocks might lose or gain 15 minutes a day. Huygens' clock, maybe 1 minute a day, sometimes less. For the first time in human history, we could measure time down to the second, not the hour, not the vague portion of the day, the second. And something shifted in human consciousness, because once you can measure seconds, you start to notice them, you start to count them, you start to feel them slipping away. Time stopped being this vague background element of life and became something you could waste. Don't waste time. Time is money. Every second counts. These phrases didn't exist before clocks became precise. They couldn't exist. You can't waste something you can't measure. But now we could measure it, down to the second. And so we invented an entirely new form of anxiety, the fear of wasted time. The pendulum clock was a miracle of physics. It gave us precision coordination progress. But it also gave us something else. It gave us the feeling that we're always running out of time. And once you feel that, you can never quite stop feeling it. The clock started ticking in town squares across Europe, and it's been ticking in our minds ever since. Time was now measurable, precise, owned. But there was still a problem. You could have the most accurate clock in the world, keeping perfect time in London. But what good was that if you were on a ship in the middle of the ocean, with no idea where you were watching your crew slowly die because you'd sailed in the wrong direction? Navigation required time, required knowing the exact hour, the exact minute in 2 places at once. And for that, the world needed a miracle. It needed a man who refused to give up. It needed John Harrison. Let me tell you a story about death. Not metaphorical death, not the philosophical kind. Real death. Bodies in the water. Thousands of them. It's the 18th century. The age of exploration. Ships are crossing oceans, connecting continents, building empires, and they're getting lost. Not a little lost. Catastrophically lost. In 1707, a British fleet was sailing home from Gibraltar. Thick fog, no visibility. The navigators calculated their position as best they could and decided they were safely west of the dangerous rocks off the Scilly Isles. They were wrong. 4 ships struck the rocks. 2,000 men drowned in a single night. This wasn't unusual. Ships disappeared constantly, wrecked on shores they didn't know were there, lost at sea because they thought they were somewhere else entirely. And the problem wasn't north-south. Finding your latitude, how far north or south you were, was relatively simple. You looked at the sun at noon, or the North Star at night, did some math, and you knew. But east-west longitude, that was hell. Here's why the Earth rotates: 15 degrees every hour. So if you know what time it is in 2 places at once, say your current location and London, you can calculate the difference and figure out how far east or west you've traveled. Simple, right? Except there's a problem. You need to know the exact time. Not sort of, not approximately, exact. And you're on a ship, pitching in storms, swinging with waves, subjected to salt spray and temperature changes and humidity. Pendulum clocks didn't work. The swinging motion of the ship threw them off. They'd gain hours or lose hours. Useless. Springs broke. Gears jammed. Everything humanity had invented to measure time worked beautifully on land and failed spectacularly at sea. Thousands were dying. Fortunes were being lost. Empires were crippled by the simple fact that ships couldn't figure out where they were. And so, in 1714, the British government did something desperate. They announced a prize, £20,000 millions in today's money, to anyone who could solve the longitude problem. The greatest minds in Europe tried. Astronomers, mathematicians, inventors. They all failed. And then from nowhere came a carpenter. His name was John Harrison. He had no formal education, no university degrees, no connections to the scientific establishment. He built wooden clocks in a small village in Yorkshire, teaching himself mechanics and mathematics from books. And he believed he could do what no one else had done. He believed he could build a clock that would work at sea. Everyone told him it was impossible. The experts said it couldn't be done. The Royal Society, the most prestigious scientific body in England, dismissed him as a naive amateur. But Harrison didn't care what they thought. He spent 5 years building his first marine chronometer. He called it H1. It was massive, ungainly, filled with innovations no one had ever seen. Balances that compensated for the ship's motion, springs that adjusted for temperature, mechanisms within mechanisms, all designed to keep ticking accurately, no matter what the ocean threw at it. He tested it on a voyage to Lisbon. It worked. Not perfectly, but it worked better than anything anyone had ever seen. The scientific establishment grudgingly admitted he might be onto something, but they didn't give him the prize. They said make it better. So he did. H2, 7 years of work, improved mechanisms, better compensation. He was about to test it when war broke out. The test was delayed. By the time peace returned, Harrison had realized H2 had a flaw, a fundamental design problem that would limit its accuracy. So he started over. H3, 17 years. 17 years of his life hunched over gears and springs, perfecting, adjusting, obsessing. He was in his 60s now. His eyes were failing. His hands shook. And he realized H3 would never be quite good enough. So, at an age when most men are preparing to die, John Harrison started again. H4. Imagine the loneliness of that decision. 4 decades of your life spent on a problem everyone says is unsolvable. 4 versions of a device, each taking years, each consuming your youth, your health, your sanity. You're old, you're tired, you've been mocked, dismissed, told to give up, and you start a 5th time. But H4 was different. Harrison realized the problem wasn't complexity, it was simplicity. H1, H2, and H3 were marvels of engineering, but they were too complicated, too many moving parts. H4 was a watch, just a pocket watch barely 5 inches across, but inside it was a lifetime of genius. It looked simple, but every gear, every spring, every tiny component was designed with such precision, such understanding of how metal expands and contracts, how friction affects movement, how temperature and humidity and motion all interact. It was a masterpiece. In 1761, at the age of 68, John Harrison watched his son board a ship to Jamaica carrying H4, 81 days at sea, through storms, through tropical heat, through cold Atlantic nights. When the ship arrived, they checked H4 against the known longitude of Jamaica. It was off by 5 seconds. 5 seconds. After 81 days on the open ocean, being thrown around by waves subjected to salt and heat and cold, this 5-inch watch had lost 5 seconds, which translated to an error of about 1 mile. 1 mile. For context, other methods of the time could be off by hundreds of miles. John Harrison had done it. He'd solved the longitude problem. He'd built a clock that could work at sea. He'd saved future generations of sailors from dying lost in the fog. But the scientific establishment still wouldn't give him the prize. They moved the goalposts. They said the test wasn't rigorous enough. They said it might have been luck. They demanded more tests, more proof, more evidence. They were astronomers, you see. They'd spent decades trying to solve longitude using the stars, using complicated tables and calculations. They'd built their careers on it. And here came a carpenter with no degree, no credentials, no right to succeed, and he'd beaten them with a watch. They couldn't accept it. For years they stalled. They delayed. They withheld the prize. Harrison was in his 70s now, broken, exhausted. He'd given his entire life to this problem, and they were going to let him die without recognition. Finally, King George III himself intervened. "By God, Harrison," the king said, "I will see you righted." In 1773, at the age of 80, John Harrison finally received his reward. Not the full prize, the Board of Longitude made sure of that, but enough. An acknowledgement that he had succeeded. 3 years later, he died. He never knew that his invention would change the world, because it did. Ships could navigate accurately. Empires expanded. Trade flourished. Maps became precise. The world for the first time knew where everything was. And today, there are 24 satellites orbiting Earth. Each one carries an atomic clock. Together, they form the Global Positioning System, GPS. And every time you open Google Maps on your phone, every time you get turn-by-turn directions, every time you're able to find yourself on a digital map with pinpoint accuracy, you're using John Harrison's idea. A clock that works in motion. A clock that tells you where you are by telling you when you are. He's been dead for almost 250 years, but his chronometer is still working, still saving people from getting lost, still proving that one person, even a carpenter with no credentials, can change the course of history if they refuse to give up. Time was now portable, precise, and it could travel across oceans. But humanity still wasn't satisfied. We wanted more accuracy, more precision. We wanted to measure time not just to the second, but to fractions of a second, so small they'd make John Harrison's head spin. We wanted to stop using gears and springs and pendulums. We wanted to use the fundamental fabric of reality itself. We wanted to build clocks out of atoms. By the early 20th century, clockmakers had reached a kind of plateau. Mechanical clocks were as good as they were going to get. Springs, gears, pendulums, balances they'd been refined to near perfection. The best clocks in the world could keep time to within a few seconds per year, which sounds impressive, and it was. But it wasn't good enough, because the world was getting faster. Communication was speeding up. Technology was accelerating, and all of it required synchronization at a level that mechanical clocks simply couldn't provide. Telephone networks needed precise timing. Radio broadcasts needed coordination, and scientists studying the fundamental nature of the universe needed clocks so accurate they could measure millionths of a second. Gears and springs couldn't do that, so we turned to something strange, something that seemed almost magical at the time. We turned to crystals. 1927. Scientists discovered that if you take a quartz crystal, just a small piece of mineral, and run an electric current through it, something remarkable happens. It vibrates, not randomly, not chaotically, but at an extraordinarily precise frequency, 32,768 times per second if you cut the crystal correctly, and it never varies. Not with temperature, not with pressure, not with time. The crystal just vibrates perfectly, eternally. You could use that vibration to drive a clock. Count the vibrations, divide by the frequency, and you have time. Accurate time. Incredibly accurate time. By the 1960s, quartz watches were everywhere, cheap enough that anyone could afford one. And that $5 watch on your wrist was more accurate than the finest mechanical chronometer from a century before, more accurate than anything a king or emperor had ever owned. Time had been democratized. But even quartz wasn't enough, because scientists had discovered something even more precise, something almost absurdly precise: atoms. Here's the thing about atoms: they vibrate too. Not mechanically, not like a crystal, but quantum mechanically. Electrons orbit the nucleus, and when they jump from one orbit to another, they absorb or release energy at very specific frequencies. And those frequencies don't change, ever. A cesium atom vibrates at exactly 9,192,631,770 times per second. Always, no matter what, whether it's hot or cold, under pressure, or in a vacuum here on Earth, or floating in deep space. That number is written into the fabric of reality itself. And in 1955, scientists at the National Institute of Standards built the first atomic clock using cesium atoms. It was so accurate that if you let it run for 300 million years, it would be off by less than 1 second. Read that again. 300 million years. 1 second of error. That's not precision. That's something close to perfection. And so, in 1967, the scientific community did something extraordinary. They redefined the second. For all of human history, a second had been defined in relation to Earth. 1 second was 1/86,400th of a day, a fraction of the time it takes our planet to rotate once. But Earth's rotation isn't constant. It's slowing down very gradually due to tidal friction. Days are getting longer, not by much, a few milliseconds per century, but enough that if you're trying to measure time with atomic precision, it becomes a problem. So they made a decision. The second would no longer be based on Earth. It would be based on cesium. 1 second is now officially defined as exactly 9,192,631,770 vibrations of a cesium atom. Time, for the first time in history, was no longer tied to our planet. It was tied to the quantum realm. And here's where it gets strange. Because Earth doesn't care about our atomic clocks. Earth keeps slowing down. Days keep getting longer, which means very occasionally atomic time and Earth time fall out of sync. And when that happens, we have to add a leap second, usually on December 31st. The last minute of the year goes 58:59:60. That's right, 60. A second that doesn't normally exist, inserted to keep our atomic perfection aligned with our wobbly, imperfect planet. And it causes chaos. Computer systems aren't designed to handle 60 seconds in a minute. Some crash, some glitch. Major websites have gone down because of leap seconds. Financial trading systems have panicked because atomic time is too perfect for the messy, organic world we live in. We built clocks so accurate, they revealed that our planet itself is an unreliable timekeeper. But we're not done, because even atomic clocks aren't precise enough anymore. Scientists are now building optical clocks, clocks that use light instead of microwaves, clocks so sensitive they can detect the time dilation caused by raising them 1 centimeter off the ground. 1 centimeter. Einstein predicted that time runs slightly faster the farther you are from a massive object. At the top of a mountain, time moves a tiny bit faster than at sea level, but the difference is so small, so infinitesimally tiny, that for all of human history, it was completely unmeasurable. Until now. Now we can measure it. We can detect the difference in time between your head and your feet. Your head is aging very slightly faster than your toes, because it's farther from Earth's center of gravity. It's a difference so small it doesn't matter. In your entire lifetime, your head will age about 100 nanoseconds more than your feet. But we can measure it. And once you can measure something, you start asking questions. What does it mean to measure time at this level? Are we measuring time itself, or just the vibrations of atoms? When we divide a second into trillions of parts, are we discovering something about reality, or just seeing how finely our instruments can slice the invisible? Time has become so precise, so abstract, that it's almost stopped meaning anything to human experience. You'll never feel a nanosecond. You'll never live a trillionth of a second. But we can measure it. We've taken something as human and intimate as time, the time it takes to breathe, to blink, to love someone, and turned it into something so technical, so removed from experience, that it only exists in laboratories and equations. And yet, even with all this precision, even with atomic clocks and quantum mechanics and cesium vibrations, we still don't know what time is. We can measure it more accurately than anything else in the universe. We can detect differences too small for human comprehension. But measurement isn't understanding. A clock can tell you what time it is, but it can't tell you what time is. For that, we need to go deeper. We need to leave the world of clocks and calendars and measurements. We need to enter the world of theory. We need to meet two men who looked at time not as something to measure, but as something to question. First, Isaac Newton, who believed time was absolute, unchanging, the same everywhere for everyone. And second, Albert Einstein, who shattered that belief into 1,000 pieces. The second doorway has shown you how we captured time, how we built clocks from shadows and water and gears and crystals and atoms. But all of that was just the surface. Now we descend deeper into the theory of time itself, into the question, does time flow? Does it have a direction? Is it even real? And the answers, the strange, beautiful, disturbing answers, are waiting just ahead. Picture a stage, a vast, infinite stage stretching in all directions. It has no walls, no boundaries. It simply is unchanging and eternal, the foundation upon which everything exists. On this stage, things happen. Actors move, props shift, scenes unfold. An apple falls, a planet orbits, a wave crashes on a shore, but the stage itself, it never changes. It's always there, absolute and unmoved, providing the backdrop for all of existence. This was Isaac Newton's vision of the universe, and time, in Newton's world, was part of that stage. It's 1687. Newton has just published Principia Mathematica, possibly the most influential scientific book ever written. In it, he describes the laws of motion and gravity that govern everything from falling objects to planetary orbits. But before he gets to any of that, he does something interesting. He defines time, not time as we experience it, messy, emotional, elastic, the kind we've been exploring, but time as it really is underlying everything. He writes, absolute true and mathematical time of itself, and from its own nature, flows equably without relation to anything external. Read that again slowly. Time flows without relation to anything external. What Newton is saying is, this time is not dependent on events. It doesn't speed up or slow down. It doesn't care if you're bored or terrified or in love. It doesn't care if anything is happening at all. Time simply flows like an invisible river at a constant rate everywhere, for everyone forever. Tick, tock, tick, tock. 1 second in London is exactly the same as 1 second in Paris. 1 second now is exactly the same as 1 second 1,000 years ago, or 1,000 years in the future. Time is the ultimate constant, the cosmic metronome, the heartbeat of the universe. And once you accept this, once you believe in absolute time, everything else becomes beautifully simple. Newton's universe was a clockwork universe. Wind it up, set it in motion, and it runs according to precise mathematical laws. If you know the position and velocity of every object at this moment, you can calculate where everything will be at any future moment. The universe becomes predictable, deterministic, knowable. Drop a ball, and Newton's equations tell you exactly when and where it will hit the ground. Fire a cannonball, and you can calculate its arc. Watch the moon orbit Earth, and you can predict eclipses centuries in advance. It all works perfectly, elegantly, because time is absolute. The same laws apply everywhere at all times, because time itself is the same everywhere at all times. This was revolutionary. This was powerful. For the first time in history, humans could make precise predictions about the physical world. We could build machines, construct bridges, navigate oceans, launch projectiles, all because Newton had given us a framework where time was reliable, constant, trustworthy. The Enlightenment bloomed from this idea: reason, order, progress, the belief that the universe operates according to rational principles that we can discover and use. The Industrial Revolution followed. Factories ran on schedules. Trains departed on time. The modern world built on precision and coordination, all resting on Newton's absolute time. It was a beautiful dream. But not everyone agreed. There was a German philosopher named Gottfried Leibniz, brilliant, contentious, perpetually arguing with Newton about who invented calculus first. And Leibniz looked at Newton's absolute time and said, "This is absurd." His argument was simple and devastating. Imagine the universe is completely empty. No matter, no planets, no stars, no anything, just empty space. In this emptiness, you place a clock. It ticks away measuring time. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Now, Leibniz asked, what is that clock measuring? For Newton, the answer was easy. It's measuring time. Absolute time. The time that flows regardless of whether anything exists. But Leibniz said, that's meaningless. Time without events isn't time. It's nothing. Time is just the relationship between events. When one thing happens, then another thing happens that sequence that relationship is what we call time. Without events, there is no time. Think about it. If nothing ever changed, if nothing ever moved, if nothing ever happened, would time exist? Or would there just be an eternal now? Newton insisted, yes, time would still exist. It would flow invisible and untouchable, even in an empty universe. Time is fundamental. It doesn't need events. Events need time. Leibniz insisted, no, that's philosophical nonsense. You're inventing an invisible, unmeasurable thing that has no effect on anything. Time is just how we describe change. No change, no time. They argued about this for years. Brilliant letters flying back and forth across Europe, each man convinced the other was missing something obvious. And 300 years later, we still haven't settled it. But here's the thing, Newton's vision worked beautifully, powerfully, practically. If you wanted to build a bridge, Newton's physics worked. If you wanted to predict the motion of planets, Newton's equations worked. If you wanted to fire a rocket to the moon, Newton's laws worked. His absolute time gave us a framework that was accurate enough for almost everything humans wanted to do. And almost everything is pretty impressive. Even today, if you're an engineer building a skyscraper, you use Newton's laws. If you're calculating the trajectory of a baseball, you use Newton's equations. If you're programming a video game, you use Newtonian physics. For 99.99% of human experience, Newton is perfectly, wonderfully correct. His universe is intuitive. It matches how we feel the world works. Objects fall down. Heavier things are harder to push. Actions have equal and opposite reactions. And time just flows. Steady, reliable, the same for everyone. It feels right. But there was a crack. A small one at first. Easy to ignore. Something strange happening with light. Throughout the 19th century, physicists started studying light more carefully. How fast it moves. How it behaves. And they discovered something odd. Light always travels at the same speed, roughly 300,000 kilometers per second. Okay, you might think, so what? But think about what that means in Newton's universe. If you're standing still and shine a flashlight, light travels away from you at 300,000 kilometers per second. But what if you're on a train moving at 100,000 kilometers per second and you shine a flashlight forward? Logically, in Newton's universe, the light should be moving at 400,000 kilometers per second relative to the ground, the train's speed plus the light's speed. But it doesn't. It moves at 300,000 kilometers per second, exactly the same as if you were standing still. How and what if you're chasing a beam of light? What if you're moving at 9.9%, the speed of light yourself trying to catch up? You'd expect the light to be moving away from you more slowly, right? But no, it's still moving away from you at 300,000 kilometers per second. Always. No matter how fast you're moving, no matter which direction, light doesn't care about your velocity. It always moves at the same speed relative to you. This violated everything Newton's physics predicted. It didn't make sense. It was impossible. And yet every experiment confirmed it. Light was breaking the rules. And if light was breaking the rules, then something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with our understanding of the universe. The problem simmered for decades. Great physicists wrestled with it, proposed complicated theories, tried to patch Newton's framework to account for this strange behavior of light. None of it quite worked. And then in 1905, in a patent office in Bern, Switzerland, a 26-year-old clerk who spent his days evaluating other people's inventions had an idea. His name was Albert Einstein, and what he realized would shatter Newton's beautiful absolute time into 1,000 pieces. Pause, build tension. Einstein asked a simple question. What if light always moves at the same speed? Because it has to. What if that's a fundamental law of the universe, more fundamental than anything else? And if that's true, if light speed is absolute, then something else has to give. Something has to be flexible. Something has to change depending on who's observing and how they're moving. That something was time. Let me tell you about the day everything changed. It's 1905, Bern, Switzerland. A young patent clerk sits at his desk during lunch break, staring at nothing, thinking. He's been obsessing over a problem for years. This strange behavior of light, the way it seems to ignore the rules of motion that govern everything else. And suddenly, like a flash, he sees it. The answer isn't that light is strange. The answer is that time is strange. Imagine you're standing on a train platform. A train rushes past at enormous speed, let's say half the speed of light, just to make the effects obvious. Someone on the train, right in the middle of the car, turns on a light bulb. Light spreads out in all directions at, as always, 300,000 kilometers per second. From the perspective of the person on the train, the light reaches the front of the car and the back of the car at exactly the same time because they're equidistant from the bulb, and light travels at the same speed in all directions. Simple, right? But now, think about your perspective. Standing on the platform, watching the train rush past. From where you're standing, the light still travels at 300,000 kilometers per second, because that's what light does. But the back of the train is moving toward the point where the light was emitted, while the front of the train is moving away from it, which means from your perspective, the light reaches the back of the train before it reaches the front. Wait, read that again. The person on the train sees the light hit both ends simultaneously. You on the platform see the light hit the back first, then the front. Same event, two different timelines. Who's right? Newton would say this is a paradox. There must be one true timeline, one objective sequence of events. Either the light hits both ends simultaneously, or it doesn't. Reality can't be two different things. But Einstein said, no, they're both right. There is no universal now. There is no master clock ticking away the same time for everyone in the universe. Time is relative to the observer. If you're moving, your now is different from my now. Not by much at everyday speeds, but at speeds approaching light speed, the differences become dramatic. Events that are simultaneous for you might be minutes apart for me, or hours, or years. There is no absolute time. There is only your time and my time, each flowing at slightly different rates, depending on how fast we're moving relative to each other. Newton's beautiful, absolute, universal time, the invisible river flowing equably for all eternity, it doesn't exist. Time is personal, time is local, time is relative, and it gets stranger. Because if time is relative, then the faster you move, the slower time passes for you compared to someone standing still. This isn't philosophy. This isn't metaphor. This is measurable, testable, real. In 1971, scientists took 4 extremely precise atomic clocks. They synchronized them perfectly. Then they put 2 on commercial airplanes, 1 flying east, 1 flying west, and left 2 on the ground. When the planes landed and they compared the clocks, the ones that had been flying were running slower than the ones on the ground. Not by much. We're talking nanoseconds, billionths of a second. But it was there, measurable, undeniable. The clocks that had been moving through space had experienced less time than the clocks that stayed still. Time had actually physically slowed down. This leads to one of the most famous thought experiments in physics, the twin paradox. Imagine 2 twins, both 20 years old. One stays on Earth. The other boards a spaceship and travels to a nearby star at 90% the speed of light. The journey takes from Earth's perspective 10 years out and 10 years back, 20 years total. When the traveling twin returns, she's aged only about 9 years. She's now 29. Her brother, who stayed on Earth, is now 40. Same amount of time passed right to 20 years. No, not from the twins' perspective. For her, the journey took 9 years. She lived 9 years. Her body aged 9 years. That's not an illusion. That's not a trick of perception. She actually experienced less time. And this isn't science fiction. This is real physics, confirmed by countless experiments. Astronauts who spend time on the International Space Station age very slightly less than people on Earth. Not enough to notice without atomic clocks, but it's happening. They're time traveling into the future. Just a tiny bit, a fraction of a second, but they're doing it. And it's not just speed that affects time. Gravity does too. This was Einstein's next insight, published in 1915 as the general theory of relativity. He realized that gravity isn't actually a force pulling things together. It's a curvature of space and time caused by mass. Imagine space-time as a stretched rubber sheet. Place a bowling ball in the center. The sheet dips, curves around the ball. Now roll a marble near it. The marble follows the curve, orbiting the bowling ball, not because it's being pulled, but because it's following the curved path of the sheet. That's gravity. But here's the wild part. Time is part of that sheet. Time is part of what curves. The closer you are to a massive object, the slower time moves. Not by much for everyday objects, but near something really massive, like a black hole, time slows dramatically. If you were to hover just outside the event horizon of a black hole and watch the universe, you'd see stars being born and dying in fast forward, civilizations rising and falling in moments. Because for you, time is moving incredibly slowly, while far from the black hole, time is moving normally. An hour for you might be a century for everyone else, but you don't need a black hole to measure this. In 2010, scientists at the National Institute of Standards took 2 atomic clocks. They put one on a table. They raised the other one by 33 centimeters, just over a foot, and the clock that was higher ran faster, measurably faster. At that height, slightly farther from Earth's center of gravity, time moves a tiny bit quicker. Your head is aging faster than your feet. Right now, by an absurdly small amount, we're talking nanoseconds over a lifetime. But it's real. Time isn't the same at different heights. It's not the same at different speeds. It's not even the same for you and the person sitting next to you if one of you is moving. And this isn't just theoretical physics. This affects your life every single day. GPS satellites orbit Earth at about 20,000 kilometers up, moving at about 14,000 kilometers per hour. Two things happen. They're moving fast. So time on the satellites slows down by about 7 microseconds per day. Special relativity. They're far from Earth, so time on the satellites speeds up by about 45 microseconds per day. General relativity. The net effect time on GPS satellites runs about 38 microseconds faster than time on the ground. 38 microseconds doesn't sound like much, but light travels really, really fast. In 38 microseconds, light travels about 11 kilometers. If GPS satellites didn't account for relativity, if they didn't constantly adjust their clocks to compensate for the fact that time is running faster up there than down here, your phone's map would be off by about 10 kilometers every day. Within a week, GPS would be useless. So every time you use Google Maps, every time you check your location, every time you get turn-by-turn directions, you are relying on Einstein's relativity. Your phone is constantly performing calculations that assume time is not absolute, that it bends with gravity and velocity, that it's different for the satellites than for you. Newton's absolute time would give you wrong directions. Einstein's relative time gets you home. So here we are. We started with Newton's beautiful dream time as a perfect unchanging river flowing at the same rate everywhere for everyone. We end with Einstein's strange reality time as a flexible, stretchable, compressible thing that depends on who you are, where you are, and how fast you're moving. Time is not a universal backdrop. It's part of the fabric of space itself. Space-time, woven together, curved by mass, stretched by velocity, and different observers moving at different speeds in different gravitational fields are living in slightly different timelines. There is no now that everyone shares. Your now and my now are slightly different always. And if we travel at different speeds or live at different altitudes, those nows drift further apart. But here's what's beautiful about this. Newton wasn't wrong. His physics still works for almost everything. His absolute time is a perfectly good approximation for human scale velocities and masses. But Einstein showed us the deeper truth, the fuller picture. Time is stranger, more flexible, more interesting than Newton imagined. And once you understand this, once you really grasp that time is not absolute, that it can slow down and speed up, that it's woven into the fabric of space itself, you start to see the universe differently. You're not moving through time like a boat down a river. You're part of space-time following curves and bends. You can't see experiencing time at a rate unique to your motion and position. Every moment you live is happening at a slightly different rate than every other moment everywhere else. You're not living in the timeline, you're living in your timeline. And that timeline is as real and as valid as any other. And yet, even after all of this, after clocks and gears and atoms, after Newton and Einstein, after measuring time to billionths of a second and discovering it bends with gravity, we still haven't answered the most fundamental question. What is time? We can measure it. We can describe how it behaves. We can predict how it curves. But we don't know what it is. Is it a dimension like space? Is it a flowing thing carrying us forward? Is it a river, a fabric, a field? Or is it something else entirely? And here's the really unsettling part. When physicists tried to combine Einstein's relativity with quantum mechanics, the physics of the very small, they discovered something shocking. Time might not be fundamental at all. At the deepest level of reality, time might not exist. We've walked through the second doorway now. We've seen how humans captured time, measured it, bent it, broke it. But there's one more doorway, one more dream, the deepest one, the one that asks, is time real? And the answer, the strange, beautiful, disturbing answer that modern physics is uncovering, is waiting just ahead, in the third doorway, in the dream of existence itself. Close your eyes and imagine this. You're holding an egg, a perfect smooth egg. You raise it above a hard floor, and you let go. The egg falls. It hits. The shell cracks. Yolk spreads across the floor in a golden puddle. Fragments of shell scatter in all directions. Now, take out your phone. Film this in reverse. Watch the video backward. Suddenly, fragments of shell slide across the floor, coming together. Yolk gathers itself into a sphere. The egg leaps up whole and unbroken into your hand. It looks absurd, impossible, wrong. But here's the strange thing. There's no law of physics that forbids it. Not one. Every equation in physics, Newton's laws, Maxwell's equations, even the quantum mechanics equations we'll get to in a moment, they all work equally well, going forward or backward in time. If you filmed billiard balls colliding and played it backward, a physicist looking at the equations wouldn't be able to tell which direction was real. The math doesn't care. The laws don't care. And yet you know, eggs don't unbreak. You know time goes one direction. You've never seen shattered glass spontaneously reassemble. You've never seen smoke gather back into a candle flame. Why, if the fundamental laws of physics don't distinguish between past and future, why does everything else? Why does time have an arrow? The answer has a name, though it sounds more like a disease than a physics concept: entropy. Entropy is roughly a measure of disorder, of randomness, of how spread out and mixed up things are. And there's a law, the second law of thermodynamics, that says entropy always increases. Things go from organized to disorganized, from concentrated to dispersed, from neat to messy. Drop that egg, and you go from one highly organized configuration, all the molecules arranged perfectly into shell membrane, white yolk, to millions of disorganized configurations, fragments and puddles scattered randomly. There's only one way for the egg to be whole and unbroken, but there are billions of ways for it to be broken. So when you drop an egg, you're not watching some mystical time force pull it toward brokenness. You're watching probability. The broken state is vastly, overwhelmingly more likely than the unbroken state, simply because there are so many more ways to be broken. It's the same reason a neat room becomes messy, but a messy room doesn't spontaneously become neat. There are countless messy configurations, only one perfectly tidy one. The universe doesn't prefer disorder. It just explores all possible states randomly, and disorder vastly outnumbers order. So, over time, things get messier, not because of a law that says they must, but because of statistics that say they probably will. And that's the arrow of time, not carved into the bedrock of physics, but emerging from probability. But this raises a troubling question. If entropy always increases, If things always go from order to disorder, then the universe must have started in a state of incredibly low entropy, incredibly organized, incredibly neat. The Big Bang, that moment of cosmic birth 14 billion years ago, wasn't a chaotic explosion. It was somehow perfectly impossibly smooth. All the energy and matter in the universe packed into an infinitesimally small point, uniform and organized. And from that organized beginning, entropy has been increasing ever since. Galaxies formed, stars ignited, planets coalesced, life emerged, eggs broke, all of it a slow slide from order toward disorder. But why? Why did the universe start so neat? Who organized it? What set up that initial low entropy state? This is one of the deepest unsolved mysteries in physics. Some scientists think it has to do with the nature of the Big Bang itself, some property of quantum gravity we don't yet understand. Others think there might be something before the Big Bang, some previous state that we can't access or measure. And a few think the question itself might be meaningless, like asking what's north of the North Pole. But whatever the answer, this much is clear: the arrow of time. The reason you remember yesterday, but not tomorrow, the reason eggs break, but don't unbreak all, comes down to that mysterious, highly organized beginning. And there are other arrows too, all pointing the same direction. The psychological arrow. You remember the past, not the future. Why? Because memories are physical traces in your brain. Neural patterns that formed after events happened. They're part of the entropy increase. The past left marks. The future hasn't yet. If entropy were decreasing, if the universe were getting more organized over time, you'd remember the future and forget the past. Your mind would work backward. Think about that. In a universe where time ran in reverse, where entropy decreased, conscious beings would experience everything backward. They'd remember what we call the future, and the past would be unknown to them. They'd light a candle by gathering smoke into a flame. They'd assemble broken eggs, and it would all seem perfectly normal because their memories would be moving in the same direction as their entropy. The causal arrow causes precede effects. You flip a light switch, then the light comes on. You don't see the light come on, and then decide to flip the switch. But this too is tied to entropy. Causes are low entropy states that cascade into higher entropy effects. A concentrated cause, your finger pushing the switch, produces a dispersed effect, photons spreading through the room. Reverse entropy and causation would reverse too. The cosmological arrow, the universe is expanding. Galaxies are moving apart. Space itself is stretching. And this expansion gives the universe a direction, a sense of toward and away from the Big Bang. All these arrows align. They all point the same way. From past to future, from order to disorder, from compressed to expanded. And together, they create what we call time. But here's the unsettling part. At the deepest level, at the level of individual particles, of quantum interactions of the fundamental equations, there is no arrow. Time is reversible. The arrow of time is not written into the laws of nature. It's a statistical phenomenon, an emergent property, a pattern that appears when you have trillions upon trillions of particles interacting, not a rule that governs each individual particle, which means, in a strange way, time's direction is an illusion, not a hallucination, not fake, but not fundamental. It's real in the same way a rainbow is real. You can see it, you can photograph it, it exists. But there's no arc of colored light actually floating in the sky. It's a pattern created by water droplets and sunlight and the position of your eye. Change any of those and the rainbow disappears. Time's arrow might be the same, a pattern that emerges from initial conditions and statistics and the peculiar way our universe began, real enough to break eggs and age our bodies and carry us from birth to death, but not fundamental, not carved into reality itself, just probable. And if time's arrow is emergent, not fundamental, then maybe time itself is emergent. Maybe time as we experience it, as we measure it, as we've been exploring through this entire journey, maybe it's not a basic ingredient of the universe at all. Maybe it's something that appears only at our scale in our world, from our perspective, and at the deepest level, at the quantum level, where reality gets strange and slippery and refuses to make sense. Time might not exist at all. Let me tell you about a cat. Not a real cat, a thought experiment cat. The most famous cat in physics. It's 1935. Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger is trying to show how absurd quantum mechanics is. So he proposes this scenario. You put a cat in a box with a radioactive atom, a Geiger counter, and a vial of poison. If the atom decays, the Geiger counter detects it and triggers a mechanism that breaks the vial, killing the cat. Radioactive decay is a quantum process, and according to quantum mechanics, before you observe it, the atom is in a superposition simultaneously decayed and not decayed, which means before you open the box, the cat is both alive and dead. Not, you don't know whether it's alive or dead. Ooh, but actually physically both. Schrödinger thought this was ridiculous. He was trying to show that quantum mechanics, if applied to everyday objects, leads to absurd conclusions. But here's the thing. Quantum mechanics turned out to be right. Not about cats. Cats are too big, too complex, too entangled with their environment to be in superposition, but about particles, about atoms, about the fundamental building blocks of reality. They really do exist in multiple states, simultaneously until observed. And in this quantum world, time behaves very, very strangely. In the equations of quantum mechanics, specifically the Schrödinger equation that describes how quantum states evolve, time appears. But it appears differently than it does in relativity. In Einstein's relativity, time is part of space-time. It can stretch compress curve. It's dynamic, flexible, relative to the observer. But in quantum mechanics, time is absolute. It's a fixed parameter, a background against which quantum states evolve. It's more like Newton's time than Einstein's, which is problematic because we know Einstein is right about relativity. We've tested it, GPS proves it every day, and we know quantum mechanics is right. We've tested it. The computer or phone you're using right now wouldn't work without it, but they describe time differently. So when physicists tried to combine them, when they tried to create a theory of quantum gravity that would describe how gravity works at the smallest scales, something strange happened. Time disappeared. In 1967, physicists John Wheeler and Bryce DeWitt wrote down an equation, now called the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, that attempts to describe the quantum state of the entire universe. It looks similar to the Schrödinger equation, which describes how quantum systems evolve over time, except for one crucial detail. There's no time variable in it. None. The equation describes the universe as a static, timeless configuration, not evolving, not changing, just existing. It's sometimes called the problem of time in quantum gravity. At the deepest level, when you try to describe the universe, quantum mechanically, time vanishes from the equations. It's not that time stops, it's that time doesn't appear in the description at all, which raises a disturbing possibility. Maybe time isn't fundamental. Maybe it's not a real thing that exists at the deepest level of reality. Maybe time is something that emerges, appears only when you zoom out from the quantum level to the classical level where we live. Think about temperature for a moment. If you look at a single molecule, it doesn't have a temperature. Temperature is meaningless at that scale. But gather trillions of molecules together, and suddenly temperature emerges. It becomes a useful concept, a real measurable thing. But it's not fundamental. It's a statistical property of large collections of particles. Maybe time is the same. At the quantum level, at the level of individual particles and fundamental interactions, there is no time. Things don't happen in sequence. There's no before and after, just a timeless quantum state, describing all possible configurations. But when you have vast numbers of particles interacting, when you have complexity and entropy, and observers, time emerges. It becomes a useful way to describe the patterns and sequences that arise, real enough to experience, real enough to measure, but not fundamental, not built into the deepest layer of reality. There's another idea even stranger from quantum mechanics itself. It's called entanglement. When two quantum particles become entangled, they become linked in a way that transcends space. Measure one particle, and you instantly know something about the other, even if it's on the other side of the universe. Einstein hated this. He called it spooky action at a distance. It seemed to violate everything we understand about cause and effect. But experiments have proven it's real. Entanglement is one of the confirmed, verified, weird but true aspects of quantum mechanics. And some physicists now think entanglement might be the key to understanding time. The idea is this: in the early universe, right after the Big Bang, particles weren't very entangled. Everything was simple, separate, disconnected. But as the universe evolved, as particles interacted and became more entangled with each other, complexity grew, connections multiplied, and that growing web of entanglement, that increasing complexity, might be what we experience as time. Time isn't a thing flowing. It's the accumulation of quantum connections. The more entangled the universe becomes, the more time has passed. It's a beautiful idea, and it might be testable in the coming decades. But even if it's wrong, even if time turns out to have a different explanation entirely, the deeper point remains. Time might not be what we think it is. So where does that leave us? We've measured time with shadows and water and gears and atoms. We've discovered it bends with gravity and slows with speed. We've traced its arrow to entropy and probability. And now we're confronting the possibility that at the deepest level, time might not be real at all. But there's one more perspective we need to explore. One more way of thinking about time that's both ancient and cutting edge, both mystical and scientific. It's called the block universe, and it suggests that past, present, and future all exist right now, simultaneously laid out like pages in a book. You're not moving through time. You're a four-dimensional object stretched across time, existing at all moments of your life at once. And if that's true, then nothing is ever truly lost. Imagine your life as a book, not a metaphor, an actual book sitting on a shelf. Page 1, your birth. Page 50, your 5th birthday. Page 300, today. This moment you listening to these words. Page 500, some moment years from now. The final page, your death. All the pages exist simultaneously. They're all there, bound together, real and present. When you read the book, when you experience your life, you move through it page by page, moment by moment. You're on page 300 right now. You remember pages 1 through 299. You don't know what's on page 301 yet, but all the pages exist right now, simultaneously. Your childhood exists. Your death exists, not as memories or possibilities, but as actual moments, just as real as this moment, just located at different positions in time. This is called the block universe, or sometimes eternalism. And it's not mysticism. It's not philosophy. It's a serious interpretation of Einstein's relativity accepted by many physicists. Here's why. Remember what Einstein showed us? There's no universal now. Different observers moving at different speeds have different definitions of what's happening at the same time. If you're standing still and I'm moving fast, events that are simultaneous for you happen at different times for me, which means there's no objective present moment that everyone shares. And if there's no universal now, then what does it mean to say only the present exists? Who's present, yours, mine? An observer on a spaceship traveling at half the speed of light. The only way to make sense of relativity is to accept that all moments are equally real. Past, present, and future all exist now, not in time, but timelessly laid out in a four-dimensional structure. You're not moving through time like a boat on a river. You're a four-dimensional object stretched out through time from birth to death, like a worm. Physicists actually call this your world line, or sometimes affectionately, your space-time worm. One end of you is being born, the other end is dying, and everything in between, every breath, every thought, every moment you've lived or will live, exists simultaneously at different points along your four-dimensional shape. From this perspective, time doesn't flow. That's an illusion of consciousness, of memory, of the way we process reality moment by moment. The universe doesn't flow. It just is. A vast four-dimensional block containing every moment that has ever happened or ever will happen, and you experiencing time as flowing. That's like a character in a movie, feeling like the story is unfolding. From outside the movie, we can see the entire film exists at once, beginning, middle, and end all present on the film strip. But from inside, from the character's perspective, it unfolds scene by scene. That's you. That's all of us, living through our world lines moment by moment, experiencing what feels like flow, but is really just the structure of our consciousness moving along a static four-dimensional shape. This has profound implications. If the block universe is true, then your past isn't gone. It still exists at earlier points in time. You, at age 5, is still there in the same way that page 50 of a book is still there, even when you're reading page 300. And your future isn't unknown and undetermined. It already exists at later points in time. Everything you will do, every choice you will make, every moment you will experience, it's already there in the block, waiting for your consciousness to reach it. This sounds like it eliminates free will. If the future already exists, then aren't all your choices already determined? Maybe. Or maybe your choices are part of what creates the structure of the block, and experiencing those choices as free is part of the four-dimensional pattern. It's a deep philosophical rabbit hole, and we don't have time to go all the way down it. But I want to focus on something else, something more personal. If the block universe is true, then nothing is ever truly lost. Think about someone you loved who's no longer alive. In the normal way of thinking about time, they're gone. They existed once in the past, but now they're not here. The past is gone, vanished irretrievable. But in the block universe, they still exist, at their position in time. The moments you shared with them, those moments, haven't disappeared. They're still there in the block, as real as they ever were. You can't access them anymore. Your consciousness has moved past them, along your world line, but they haven't ceased to exist. They're still there, still real, still happening from the perspective of the timeless, four-dimensional structure. Every laugh you shared, every conversation, every touch, all of it still exists, frozen in time eternal. Is that comforting, or is it terrifying? I think it depends on how you look at it. On one hand, it means nothing ever truly dies. The moments are never lost. In some sense, the people we've loved are still there, still living those moments forever. On the other hand, it means we can never go back. We're trapped in our forward progression through the block, unable to return to these moments, even though they still exist. It's like being in a vast library where every book that was ever written still exists, but you can only read forward, and once you turn the page, you can never turn it back. Every moment of beauty, of love, of joy, it's preserved forever in the structure of the universe, but you can only experience it once. And then your consciousness moves on, leaving that moment behind, even though it's still there. So which is it? Does time flow, carrying us from past to future? Or does time not flow at all? Do we simply exist four-dimensionally stretched across moments that all exist simultaneously? Is time fundamental, built into the deepest fabric of reality? Or is time emergent, appearing only at our scale, a useful fiction our minds create to make sense of change? Does time exist? The answer, strange as it sounds, is we don't know. We can measure time more precisely than anything else in the universe. We can describe how it bends, how it dilates, how it relates to space and matter and energy, but we don't know what it is. Maybe it's real and fundamental. Maybe it's emergent and statistical. Maybe it's an illusion created by consciousness. Maybe it's all three somehow in ways we don't yet understand. What we do know is this: time as you experience it, elastic, emotional, personal, woven into your memories and hopes and fears, is real enough to shape your life, real enough to measure your heartbeats, real enough to carry you from birth to death. And whether it's fundamental or emergent illusion or reality, one thing is certain: you are living it right now, this moment. And in the end, maybe that's the only thing that matters. Not whether time is real in some ultimate cosmic sense, but whether you're here, present, alive in it. We've walked through the third doorway now. We've seen time questioned, dissolved, reconsidered. We've seen it might not exist at the deepest level, and yet it shapes everything we experience. And now, there's only one thing left: to come back, to return from the mystery to the moment, to wake up before we step through the final doorway, before we return to where we began, there's one question we haven't asked yet. The question that's haunted human imagination since we first understood that time moves in only one direction. Can we go back? Can we travel through time? Let's start with the direction. That's easy. The direction that's not just theoretically possible, but actually happens. Traveling to the future. You're doing it right now, 1 second per second. Congratulations, time traveler. But what if you want to go faster? Einstein's relativity gives you a method move at high speed. Remember the twin paradox. One twin stays on Earth. One travels near the speed of light. When the traveling twin returns, less time has passed for her. She's younger. She's experienced fewer years while everyone else aged normally. She hasn't stopped time. She's traveled into their future. From her perspective, she lived 9 years. From Earth's perspective, 20 years passed. When she returns, it's 20 years later. She's jumped forward 11 years. She's a time traveler. And this isn't science fiction. It's happening right now in small amounts. There's a Russian cosmonaut named Sergei Krikalev who spent 803 days in orbit on the International Space Station, moving at about 28,000 kilometers per hour. Because of time dilation, both from his velocity and from being farther from Earth's gravity, well, he aged slightly less than people on the ground, about 0.02 seconds less. It's not much. You wouldn't notice it without atomic clocks, but it's real. Sergei Krikalev has traveled 0.02 seconds into the future. He's the closest thing we have to a real-time traveler. And if we could build a spaceship that travels at 99.9% the speed of light, you could travel centuries or millennia into the future in what would feel like a few years to you. You'd board the ship, wave goodbye travel for what feels like 5 years, and return to find that 5,000 years have passed on Earth. Everyone you know would be long dead. Civilizations would have risen and fallen. The world would be unrecognizable. But you could do it. The physics allows it. So time travel to the future, solved. Difficult and expensive, but theoretically possible. But the past, that's where it gets complicated and strange and maybe impossible. Einstein's equations do technically allow for certain configurations of space-time that include closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back on themselves. Imagine walking in a straight line and somehow ending up back where you started, but in the past. The mathematics permits it. But mathematics permitting something and nature allowing it are very different things. One theoretical possibility involves wormholes, shortcuts through space-time, connecting two distant points. If you had a wormhole and you moved one end of it at high speed while keeping the other stationary, time dilation would create a difference. One end would be in the future relative to the other. Step through the wormhole in one direction and you go forward in time. Step through in the other direction and you go backward. But there are problems. First, we don't know if wormholes exist. They're allowed by the equations, but we've never found one. Second, even if they exist naturally, they might be microscopic and short-lived. Creating a traversable wormhole might require exotic matter with negative energy, which we've never observed and might not exist. Third, even if you could create one, there's a fundamental limitation. You can only travel back to the point when the wormhole was created, no earlier. So If someone builds a time machine in the year 2500, you could use it to travel back to 2500, but not to 2024, not to ancient Rome, not to the age of dinosaurs, which might explain why we've never met any time travelers. The time machine hasn't been invented yet, and when it is, travelers from the far future will arrive at that moment, not this one. But let's say you somehow managed it. Let's say you found a way to travel to the past. Immediately, you run into paradoxes. The most famous is the grandfather paradox. You travel back to 1920, you accidentally prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. Your parents are never born. You're never born. But if you're never born who traveled back in time to prevent your grandparents from meeting, it's a logical impossibility, a self-contradicting loop. How does the universe handle this? One possibility, it doesn't. The paradox proves that backward time travel is impossible. The universe protects itself from contradictions. Try to create a paradox, and something will always prevent you. Your gun will jam, you'll miss the train, you'll change your mind at the last second. This is called the Novikov self-consistency principle. The universe only allows things to happen if they're self-consistent. No matter what you try to do in the past, you'll fail to change it because the past has already happened and included your attempt to change it. You can't change history because you never did. Another possibility, the many worlds interpretation. Every time you make a choice, the universe splits into parallel branches. In one branch, you chose coffee. In another, you chose tea. Both versions of you are real in different universes. If you travel back in time and prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother, you don't erase yourself. You create a new branch of reality where you were never born, but you came from a different branch, so you're fine. You're just now in a timeline that diverges from your original one. Your original grandparents still met. Your original self still exists in that branch. But here in this new branch, things are different. This solves the paradox, but at a cost. You can never go home. The timeline you came from still exists, but you're not in it anymore. You're in a parallel world, an alternate history. And then there's the bootstrap paradox, which doesn't involve killing anyone, but is somehow even stranger. Imagine you travel back in time and give your younger self the plans for a time machine. Your younger self grows up, builds the machine using those plans, and eventually travels back in time to give them to their younger self. But where did the plans come from? Originally, they exist in a loop, with no beginning, information appearing out of nowhere. With no source, no creator, this seems to violate causality. Effects need causes. Information needs an origin. And yet, if backward time travel is possible, bootstrap paradoxes might be unavoidable. Shakespeare's plays might have been written by a time traveler who brought them back from the future. Great inventions might appear from temporal loops, no one ever truly inventing them. It's deeply strange, and many physicists think this strangeness is nature's way of saying no. Time travel to the past violates too many principles, creates too many impossibilities. The universe, it seems, doesn't want us meddling with what's already happened, and maybe that's for the best. Imagine the chaos if we could change the past, the wars that would be fought over, who gets to control history, the attempts to fix mistakes, that would create new unpredictable consequences. The past, however painful, however full of regret, is at least stable. It's the foundation we stand on. And maybe it needs to stay that way. So we can travel to the future slowly by moving fast or waiting patiently. But the past seems locked, inaccessible, protected by the fundamental structure of cause and effect. We can remember it, we can study it, we can learn from it, but we can't return to it. And perhaps that's the most important thing. Time teaches us, move forward. The only direction is ahead, not because we chose it, but because that's the nature of existence. The arrow points forward, entropy increases, memories form, life unfolds, and all we can do is be here now, living this moment, and then the next, and then the next. Which brings us, at last, to the final doorway, the one that asks not what time is, but what we should do with it. We've come a long way together, through the elastic emotional time inside your body, through the measured mechanical time humans built with clocks and equations, through the mysterious, maybe not even real time that physics can't quite explain. And now, here at the end, we arrive at a question that's both ancient and urgent. If time is this strange, this flexible, this uncertain, what does that mean for how we live? There's a physicist named Julian Barber who has spent his entire career arguing for something radical. He says time doesn't exist, not as an illusion in the sense that you're hallucinating it, but as a fundamental ingredient of reality. According to Barber, the universe is not a film strip playing through time frame by frame. It's a vast collection of moments. He calls them nows, each one static, eternal, complete unto itself. These nows don't change. They don't evolve. They just are. What we experience as time as the flow from past to future is really consciousness moving through these nows, like flipping through photographs in an album. Each photograph is frozen, but flip through them quickly and you create the illusion of motion, of change of time. The universe, in Barber's view, is the ultimate photograph album. Infinite nows, all existing simultaneously in a timeless configuration. And consciousness, your consciousness experiences them one by one, creating the sensation of time flowing. But the flow isn't real. It's a trick of perspective. This sounds insane, and maybe it is. But here's the thing. The fundamental laws of physics support this view. Newton's laws are time reversible. Maxwell's equations are time reversible. Even the Schrödinger equation in quantum mechanics is time reversible. None of the deepest laws of physics contain a built-in time flow. The only place time's arrow appears is in entropy, in statistics, in the emergence of complexity from simple rules, which suggests time itself might be emergent, not fundamental, but derived, a pattern that appears at our scale but doesn't exist in the bedrock of reality, like how wetness emerges from H2O molecules that aren't themselves wet, or how temperature emerges from molecular motion, but individual molecules don't have temperature. Time might emerge from timeless laws. And you know what's interesting? This isn't a new idea. 2,500 years ago, the Buddha said something remarkably similar. The past no longer exists. The future has not yet come. The present does not stay. He wasn't talking about physics. He was talking about the nature of suffering, of attachment, of the human condition. But his insight matches what quantum gravity is suggesting, that time, as we conceive it, might not be the ultimate reality. Medieval Christian mystics spoke of the eternal now, a state of being where past, present, and future collapse into a single, timeless moment in the presence of the divine. Eckhart Tolle wrote an entire book called The Power of Now, arguing that the present moment is all we ever really have. Meditation practices from countless traditions aim to dissolve the sense of time to exist fully in the immediate experience without dragging along memories of the past or anxieties about the future. And neuroscience has shown that when people meditate deeply, activity in the default mode network of the brain, the network associated with thinking about past and future, with self-referential thought decreases dramatically. The sense of time fades, not because time has stopped, but because the part of the brain that creates the narrative of time has quieted. What if all of these, the physics, the philosophy, the mysticism, the neuroscience, are pointing to the same truth? That time as we normally experience it is something our minds construct, not hallucination, not fiction, but a model, a way of organizing experience, a framework our consciousness uses to navigate reality. Useful, essential even, but not ultimate, not the deepest truth. So here's the question: if time might not be fundamentally real, how should you live? And I think the answer is paradoxical, beautiful, and deeply practical. Live as if every moment matters, because each moment is all there is. If the past is gone and the future hasn't arrived, then this moment right now, this breath, this heartbeat, is the only thing that exists. Not philosophically, not metaphorically, but actually. This moment is your entire universe, and it's the only moment you'll ever have. Because as soon as the next moment arrives, it too will be this moment. The eternal now, constantly refreshing. You never actually leave the present. You can think about the past or the future, but you do that thinking now, in this moment. The present is all there is, all there has ever been, all there will ever be. Does this mean the past doesn't matter? No. The past has shaped this moment. Your history, your memories, your scars and triumphs, they're all part of the texture of now. Honor them, learn from them, carry them gently, but don't live in them. Does this mean the future doesn't matter? No. Your choices now create the conditions for future moments. Plant seeds now, and they'll grow into trees you'll shelter under later. Plan wisely, choose carefully, build something good. But don't live in an imagined future that hasn't arrived and might never come. Live here, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this moment of existence. That is the only thing you actually have. And here's what's beautiful. When you do this, when you actually bring your full attention to the present moment, time changes. Remember the beginning of this journey, how time bends with attention. When you're fully present, time often seems to slow down, not because the clock is ticking differently, but because you're experiencing more fully. You're not skimming the surface of life while your mind races ahead or behind. You're diving in. You're here. And presence is where life happens. Not in the past, not in the future. Here, now, always, now. So let me ask you one final time the question I asked at the very beginning. Where are you? Not what room, what city, what country, but where are you in time? Are you here in this moment listening to these words? Or is your mind somewhere else, planning tomorrow, replaying yesterday, floating in a dream of time that doesn't actually exist? Because if time is a mystery, If physics can't tell us what it is, if it might not even be fundamental, then the only time you can be sure of is this one, this moment, this now. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. Time is the river we thought we were sailing on, only to discover we are the river. Time is the stage we thought we were performing on, only to realize we are both the stage and the play. Time is the mystery we tried to solve, only to find that we ourselves are part of the mystery. We started this journey asking, what is time? And we end it, realizing time is whatever brings you to this moment right here, right now, where your breath is moving, where your heart is beating, where you are alive and present and here. And whether time is real or illusory, fundamental or emergent, flowing or static, this moment is real. You are real. And that, in the end, might be the only thing that matters. Sleep well, time traveler. Wherever you are, whenever you are home.